What does it take to build a monument in the ancient world? 5,000 years ago, a group of people on England's Salisbury Plain did something unimaginable, illogical, and frankly, crazy. They brought massive 30-ton Sarsen stones from 30 kilometers away. That alone was a monumental task. But the real mystery isn't about those giant stones. It lies in the smaller, 4-ton bluestones, placed right at the heart of the circle. These stones weren't local. They weren't from 30 kilometers away either. They came from the Preseli Hills, in Wales, a staggering 250 kilometers away. Imagine that journey, crossing mountains, rivers, forests, and swamps, all while moving 4-ton stones. Even with modern trucks, this would be a logistical nightmare. But they did it without metal tools, or even the wheel. Why? Why would they go to such an insane, seemingly impossible effort? Salisbury Plain already had plenty of massive Sarsen stones. Why were they so obsessed with these specific stones from so far away? Welcome to the Shot of History. Today, we're exploring Stonehenge. It's the world's most iconic, most photographed, and most famous prehistoric monument. We've seen it so many times that we don't even really see it anymore. We just say, oh, it's just a bunch of stones. But Stonehenge is so much more than a single stone circle. It wasn't built in a day. It's a massive, sprawling complex that was continuously evolving, changing, and being rebuilt over 1,500 years. It wasn't just a monument, it was a generational project that different cultures signed their names on. And no, this project wasn't built by druids, nor was it magicked into existence by Merlin. This was the work of a belief and a determination that is hard for us to even comprehend today. So, let's peel back the layers of this 1,500-year-long construction project. Phase 1 began around 3000 BCE, and surprisingly, it started before any of the famous stones arrived. Stonehenge was initially a massive circular ditch and an earthen bunker structure known as a henge. Inside the circle were 56 huge pits, now known as the Aubrey Holes. In its earliest form, this was a prestigious burial ground, a place for tribal elites whose cremated remains were buried within the sacred enclosure. At this point, there were no giant stones. Then, around 2500 BCE, something changed. This is phase 2. The obsession with the bluestones. The bluestones arrived, all the way from the Preseli Hills, 250 kilometers away. So, how on earth did they manage this impossible journey? One popular theory suggests they used massive rafts to travel by sea. They would have moved the stones to the Welsh coast, navigated the treacherous waters of the Bristol Channel, and then used rivers to get them closer to Salisbury. This was an incredibly perilous sea journey. A 4-ton stone on a primitive raft. One wrong move, and it's all at the bottom of the sea. The second theory proposes a purely land-based route. This would have involved the sheer power of hundreds of people, dragging the stones on massive wooden sleds, rolling them over logs. Whichever route they took, this was an unimaginable effort that likely spanned generations. But it brings us back to that central question. Why? Why go to all this trouble to get these specific stones, when perfectly good local stones were available? This is where our first compelling interpretation comes into play. The ancestors' legacy. A shocking discovery made recently in Wales has completely changed our understanding. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a dismantled stone circle at a site called Waun Mawn, right in the Preseli Hills. The diameter of this dismantled circle was an exact match for the bluestone circle at Stonehenge. Even more amazing, the shapes of the holes left by the missing stones corresponded perfectly to the shapes of the bluestones at Stonehenge. This points to a staggering possibility. What if the people who built Stonehenge were migrants from Wales, and when they moved and settled on Salisbury Plain, they didn't want to leave their sacred places behind? What if those bluestones weren't just building materials? What if they were the actual temple of their ancestors? In Tislight, what they did wasn't just moving material from a quarry. They were relocating their ancestral home, their entire monument, 250 kilometers to their new land. This transforms a 250-kilometer logistical nightmare into a deeply human and understandable pilgrimage. But there is another theory, a much stronger one supported by a wealth of archaeological evidence, and this theory completely changes our perspective on what Stonehenge really was. According to this idea, Stonehenge wasn't a temple. It was more like a hospital. Where's the evidence for this? It's in two places: the place the stones came from, and the place where they were erected. First, the source of the stones. The Preseli Hills in Wales have been famous for their magical or healing waters since ancient times. Numerous ancient springs and wells in that area were believed to possess healing properties and were considered sacred sites. So, the bluestones themselves were sourced from a place already considered magical and imbued with healing power. Second, The location of the stones. The area surrounding Stonehenge is a vast necropolis, a city of the dead, filled with hundreds of burial mounds from the Neolithic and Bronze Ages. When archaeologists excavated these mounds, they made a shocking discovery. Many of the skeletons found there showed signs of terrible diseases or severe injuries, broken bones, deformed limbs, and traces of fatal illnesses. But the biggest shock wasn't the condition of the bodies. Isotope analysis performed on the tooth enamel of these skeletons revealed where these people had spent their childhoods, and they were not locals. They came from all over Europe, from as far away as Ireland, Scotland, even Scandinavia and the Alps. Now, let's put the pieces together. We have sick and injured people traveling from all across Europe. We have magical stones, believed to have healing powers, brought from a sacred mountain. And we have these people being buried around these very stones. This interpretation completely redefined Stonehenge. It wasn't just a local monument, it was the Neolithic world's version of Lourdes, the famous Christian healing center. It was an international pilgrimage site for healing. People traveled hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, hoping to touch those magical bluestones and be cured by their power. And for some, this was their final journey, and they were laid to rest near the sacred stones they had traveled so far to reach. But what about the massive Sarsen stones that came later, around 2400 BC? Those iconic 30-ton giants were brought from about 30 kilometers away. The real engineering marvel here wasn't just moving them. It was how they lifted the 10-ton lintels on top. And even more incredibly, they applied woodworking techniques to stone. They carved mortise and tenon joints to lock the uprights and lintels together, like a gigantic, prehistoric Lego set. This incredible effort shows just how sacred those smaller bluestones were to them. They felt the need to build the world's most magnificent, most permanent cathedral around them, to protect and enshrine those sacred relics. And yes, that stone cathedral is perfectly aligned with the summer and winter solstice. While New Grange in Ireland was a light machine designed to capture the solstice sun, Stonehenge was a massive cathedral designed to frame that celestial event. Perhaps they believed that during these magical moments of the year, the healing power of the bluestones reached its absolute peak. In the end, the secret of Stonehenge isn't found in the how, but in the why. Why go to such extraordinary lengths? The answer isn't about engineering. It's about belief, whether they were carrying the very essence of their ancestors or seeking a cure for their suffering. That 250-kilometer journey stands as the most enduring monument to what human beings can achieve when driven by hope. We've seen the sheer scale of the stones at Karnak. We've seen the masterful control of light at New. We've seen the isolation of faith in Malta. And here, at Stonehenge, we see the place where all of these ideas converge. Hope. If this journey gave you a new perspective on this ancient wonder, please subscribe to our channel. So, how did this idea of the legacy of the giants spread across the entire world? In our next episode, we'll search for the final piece of the megalith puzzle, the global megalith phenomena. Thank you for watching.